Honestly, intentionally, I set out to make a video reflecting on season 15 of The Real Housewives of Atlanta, but as I sat down to write it, I realized I just didn't have that strong of an opinion on Sheree's fibroids or if Drew kissed LaToya. The season was just kind of bland, and as the season progressed, a more interesting question began to emerge, and that was, how do we fix this? Now, I love all of my Real Housewives franchises, but for so long, Atlanta was just the pinnacle. The cast was dripping in icons who could effortlessly mix both high and low stakes drama. They brought a lot in the way of personal stories, the tragic, the juicy, and the absurd. They gave us feuds, they gave us fallouts. These women brought us some of the most memorable moments across reality television, and best of all, they were absolutely hilarious. If you wanted to watch phenomenal reality television, The Real Housewives of Atlanta was a very safe bet. But somewhere in the course of its run, the show just lost that it factor. The most compelling cast members started leaving the show or changing for the less entertaining. The show kept introducing us to new women, pretty much all of whom flopped, so we were left with a graveyard of friends of and one-season wonders. And now, at this point, on the heels of season 15, it's clear that the show has lost its luster. What was once appointment television has now become background noise. But I don't think the show is a lost cause. We've actually got several case studies, if you will, of Bravo shows that got their groove back after a previous dry spell. So in this video, let's speculate on some of the ways the show could be saved. Let me know what you think could do the trick. And while I have you here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So let's start with tactic 1, keeping the show as is and hoping for the best. Right now, we're working with a cast of veterans Kandi, Kenya, Sheree, and Marlo, joined by a newer guard in Drew and Sanya, with friends of Monyetta and Courtney rounding out the cast. Could Bravo HQ rely on this? I guess, if you want a mediocre show. Because that's what it is. It's not unwatchable. I actually enjoyed it on a binge, but I was never like spending my Sundays itching to watch it, you know? So let's break down where the show is at now and where it could go in the future if we maintain the status quo. I want to start with a couple things I like. First off, the editing. The show looks absolutely superb. I'm so into the facelift the graphics got. It's giving ethereal realm and I love it. The establishing shots and b-roll are just gorgeous. I'm actually an Atlanta girl myself and it's like an ode to this city I love so much. The music sounds great and I love these cutesy bits the editor's thrown in. A+ to them. Another thing I thought was handled well was probably the most intense storyline of this season, the Drew and Ralph split up. It was tense and dramatic and I was enthralled. But it did happen after filming had formally wrapped, so we got like 15 minutes in the finale episode and this extremely awkward bit at the reunion, but my heart was pumping through those 15 minutes, so I've got to give props. And Drew's song was definitely memorable, and the whack factor of it all reminded me of why I love Drew so much. I also do generally like the cast, at least as individuals. They all offer something I'm into, but I think holistically the group doesn't work that well. And since I'm already getting negative, let's move right into the things I don't particularly care for. Let's start with the cast dynamics. So while I do mostly like the cast individually as housewives, I just don't think they work as a group. The big issue, I think, is that we don't really have a leader. There's nobody pulling everyone together the way Nene may have done in the past, or people like Kyle and Tamra do on other franchises. No one really gives centerpiece energy. Kandi obviously has a status on the show as the longest running member, and I think most of the housewives look up to her in some way, but she's just not invested enough in the group for them to really be pulled into things by her. In fact, we're now overtly seeing the consequences of how disengaged she is, as Marlo spent the whole season trying to expose this, and it was clear it was affecting the other women too. I also think Kandi is a little too drama-averse to have this type of role on the show. I feel like you have to be somewhat confrontational or a bit of a pot stir to be a good center symbol girl, and Kandi just doesn't seem that interested in getting into the muck unless she's pulled in by someone else. She's a great leader in business, but socially on the show, it just doesn't happen, perhaps by Kandi's choosing. Kenya seems like she could be a good option, but I don't know, it just doesn't seem to happen. It's kind of weird because she has such an alpha type of personality, and she can be such a great champion for other women, added to the fact that she's been on the show for ages and has become one of the most well-known housewives in the Bravoverse. But I think because she can be so emotionally unpredictable, it stops the other women from fully looking to her as a leader. Sheree has just never really had the personality for it. She's always seemed kind of content to be a sidekick, and even though she's got a dynamic personality, she's not like leader vibes. She does have the bone collector thing going, being someone who's not afraid to ask questions and stir the pot, as well as somewhat of a bring the group together quality with the Gucci lunch this season, but I don't know, she's just not a centerpiece to me. Both Drew and Sanya are too new and not nearly alpha enough for it. Marlo seems to want to be a leader on the show, and we see her act as a sort of leader to her little clique of Sanya and Sheree, but I don't know, I just can't see Marlo being the face of the show. Maybe it's because we saw her with Nene for so long, who really does have this quality, and as Marlo was a friend of during the reign of Nene, she always felt like kind of more of a sidekick. It could also be that a lot of the women just don't really like her because it doesn't take much for Marlo to go below the belt. But regardless of why it's the case, I just can't see Marlo emerging next season as the connector housewife. Another thing I didn't really like about this season was some of the story choices. One of the weirder choices was how Kenya's story was handled. She's been outspoken about the fact that she filmed the whole journey of opening her spa salon, Kenya Moore Hair Care, but we saw next to nothing about it on the show. Instead, we got glimpses glimpses of her love life, dating this guy Monyetta had set her up with, but it didn't seem that serious, and we honestly didn't see much of him either. We got all of these mini shots of Kenya with her daughter Brooklyn, which were all adorable and honestly a highlight of the season for me, but there wasn't really a story with any of them. It'd just be like Kenya and Brooklyn doing karate or playing dress up or something. It kind of worries me that they cut out her business launch, as we saw the same thing happen to Tamra in season 14, her last season before she was fired. I think Sheree's personal storyline was handled weird too. We saw early on that she was now a grandmother, or as she prefers, a grandma, but we got much more focus on her journey having fibroids. Now, I feel for her, and that's awful, and I don't want to see her in pain, but why was this the focus? The grandma thing had so much more potential. Sheree is such a comedically gifted person, and I just know that she would have given us hilarious bits babysitting or trying to show Cairo how to parent. They should have stretched out the sip and see planning, as Sheree's most iconic moments come as a result of planning parties. Sheree wanted floating teddy bears and a shrine to Mecca. Give me more of that. With the fibroids, there's just not much there. It's sad to see Sheree in pain, but there's just not much to discuss or do with it. The only thing I can think of is that they highlighted this to have the end for the women to go to Portugal, as the guise of the trip was for Sheree to get holistic treatments, but like what? I don't think most people associate Portugal and healing vibes, and we really don't need some lame excuse for why the women are going on the trip. Just say you're going. I don't know. I just think an opportunity was missed with Sheree this season. Marlo's story was fine, I guess. We got kind of a redemption from last season on the Munty front, as things seemed good with her nephews. She didn't kick them out of the house this year, so hey, it's progress. We also saw a strong focus on her work with her life coach, and saw her at least trying not to be reactive. Did it always work? No, but she made an effort. Her other focus was on dating, a topic always shrouded in mystery when it comes to our fashion queen. I actually loved this. I thought it was fun and light, and it was good to see Marlo happy with Scott Lee, however serious they are. Sanya's story started really interesting, with the focus being on the tension she was facing with her sister and her brother-in-law over their role as her employees. There's something unique about the story, as for so long her athletic talent made her the breadwinner of the family, so she grew up kind of having the family revolve around her, and now years later we're seeing the burnout from this. And while this story has intrigue, it kind of flopped because it made Sanya super unlikable, at least to me. Last year I was pretty neutral on her, but I started to actively dislike her this season as she acted so entitled towards her family. It's no good if the audience is rooting against a housewife in her personal storyline. I guess things turned around by the end of the season when she announced she was pregnant, as who's gonna root against pregnancy, but yeah. I think we should be rooting for housewives when they're not with the group. Kandi's storylines were interesting the first time we saw them. We all know the formula. She's working on some project, be it a business or a creative venture. It goes well, but she's so busy and successful that it causes tension with a family member, either her husband, her mother, or her kids. Yeah, it's gotten predictable, but on the other hand, I think it's just her reality. Should she conjure up something else just for us? No, because then it would come off as inauthentic, so it is what it is. It works for Kandi, so why change things up? I get it for her, but for us, it's gotten redundant. There were sparks of talking about this shooting situation at her restaurant. Production was not shy to show us that they tried, but Kandi shot it down. I get why she wouldn't want to talk about it, given that it's a legal thing and she doesn't want to associate her restaurant with violence, but I was definitely more curious about that over Kandi's busy schedule. I guess it's up to the network or whoever to decide if they're going to allow Kandi to give us more of the same, but I think the audience is fair to want something different from Mrs. Burress Tucker. And last, Drew, who definitely had the biggest storylines of the season, making moves in the entertainment industry and eventually dealing with her split up with Ralph. I'm personally very intrigued by the music and film scene, so I always like seeing this kind of stuff. It also kept her tied to Kandi even when the two had tension. And the divorce segment was interesting to me, even if it was brief and tacked on to the end. We of course got moments scattered in of the tension between her and Ralph, but we've been seeing that since Drew first stepped on the scene. I'm glad she had something else going for her, even if it wasn't anything totally new for the show. So yeah, while it's not terrible, I don't think keeping the show as is a recipe for success. But let's move on and discuss Tactic 2, which is kind of a delusional spin-off of Tactic 1, and that is to keep things the same and hope for some massive scandal to break. This tactic was recently demonstrated on Beverly Hills with the Girardi fraud stuff, although I think the show also benefited from good casting choices around the same time, but there's a way better example of this happening, and that is, of course, Vanderpump Rules. The show is heavily rumored to be on the brink of cancellation or being split into spin-offs when Tom Sandoval cheated on his 9-year partner Ariana with fellow cast member Raquel, and the fan base went absolutely rabid. The numbers the show was pulling by the end of season 10 rivaled Atlanta in its heyday, so don't knock this method, but it's not really something you could predict. Plus, we did get a smidge of this with the Drew and Ralph divorce, which, as I mentioned, I thought was handled pretty well, but I think the audience isn't as invested in Drew, and the divorce wasn't exactly shocking. Even the rumors of Drew dating a woman weren't enough to rock the Bravoverse, so I don't see how this situation could revive the show if it hasn't already. The most scandalous thing I think could bring the show new intrigue would be if Phaedra returned and Kandi remained on the cast. If you remember, the two had one of the nastiest fallouts in Housewives history. You can actually watch a full breakdown of the saga in my video on the situation, which I'll link in the description. I think it would definitely be an angle to get people invested back in Atlanta, but I don't really see it happening. Kandi has made it crystal clear that she has no interest in hearing Phaedra out, and it seems like Miss Parks is kind of just dead to her, so I don't see Kandi sticking around if Phaedra came back. And Phaedra has also found a new reality TV home, as she'll be a cast member on Married to Medicine, and has referred to Atlanta as a sinking ship, so this doesn't seem like an option. Aside from that, I'm not really sure where we could even find a scandal that could rock the show. If you can dream up some situation, let me know in the comments. So while we've seen this work on other shows, it's not something that can be orchestrated and therefore shouldn't be relied upon. But let's move on to tactic 3, going back in the vault and bringing back previous cast members. We're currently seeing this successfully executed by the Real Housewives of Orange County. For Atlanta, this seems like an obvious choice given the huge roster of iconic past cast members we've seen on the show. The problem is, not all of these women could realistically come back. The series also already kind of tried this by bringing back Sheree and upgrading Marlo in season 14, and it clearly didn't revive the show. But let's explore some other names which I've seen thrown around as options to come back. First, let's talk about Nene. Now, Nene made Real Housewives of Atlanta. While not technically a fact, it basically is one. We all know the woman is a legend, but she also sued Bravo very publicly, and the network isn't being very coy in their disdain for their former star. When Marlo vs. Kandi was really hot this season, they gave us this retrospective of clips of the two of them and cut Nene out of the opening lineup. They also had this big OG dinner hosted by Sheree this season, with Nene completely left out. Nene has said she'd come back for the fans, but it doesn't seem like the network is interested. We saw her grow more and more jaded by the show during the course of her run, and while she always had the it factor, she seemed to lose some of her jazz as time passed. I'll always love Nene, but it seems like her time as a Real Housewife is behind her. But let's talk about someone who is a more realistic option, and that is Porsha Williams. I think if they're going to go after getting anyone back, Porsha is their very best option. She's hilarious, she has centerpiece energy, and she has connections to the current cast. She seems to still be on good terms with Drew and Kandi, and has this intense relationship with Kenya that's always fun to watch. She'd fit back in very easily. Plus, she's only gotten wealthier and more glamorous since marrying Simon, the scandal for which she seemingly previously left the show to avoid. Of course, she'd have to face some questions about this if she came back, but now that she's been married for a while and the heat around the situation has died down enough that it wouldn't be the sole focus of this season, and I don't think it would test her relationship or anything like that, it seems like it wouldn't be a bad decision for her. She also seems open to the idea, staying in the spotlight by appearing on Ultimate Girls Trip 3 and Stars on Mars. I think she just wants to be paid what she's worth, and I think it could be in Bravo's best interest to cash up the cash and bring back Porsha. Another person who's been staying in the spotlight is Kim Zolciak. She's had this boomerang type of divorce situation, constantly being on and off with her husband or ex or whatever the situation is today, Croy. We definitely have a story and a scandal were she to come back, given all of the slings being lodged in the press about her divorce and potential vices. Socially, she has kind of the best of both worlds, as she has a hardcore ally in Sheree and a hardcore enemy in Kenya. Kenya would get in there and ask all the questions, given that she absolutely hates Kim, and Kim feels the same, telling us so as recently as this past season. I think it could also be interesting to see how Marlo reacts to Kim, as she generally doesn't like her, I don't think. But she's also currently anti-Kenya and pro-Sheree, so it would be a real bind for her to navigate. And you know she'd have hilarious commentary on all things Kim. Kim and Drew could also potentially bond over their public separations, though it wouldn't take much for the two to have some sort of spat and end up hating each other. Her and Kandi's relationship is so up and down, and Kim knows how to trigger Kandi, so we'd have something set up there. Kim could be the powder keg this show needs to all out explode. The potential for mess is absolutely there with Kim, but she doesn't really have a great track record as a housewife. She has a history of refusing to film for events or puts in the bare minimum of FaceTime, and always seems to find some sort of excuse to get out of going on trips. If that's what we're getting, then I'll pass, but with the alleged financial hardship she's facing, plus having lost her spinoff show a few years back, she could be a lot more incentivized to do her job were she to return these days. Another option could be Cynthia Bailey, who we saw pop up a few times this season. I love Cynthia and would love to have her back, but do I think her return would save the show? No. She's very open about her beta status and doesn't have the connections with the cast to bring them together as a cohesive group, but while I don't think she'd bring the show back to life, she wouldn't harm it by coming back. She's very likable and has real relationships with the women, so I think she would be a great face to see back. I feel like a friend of role would be great for Cynthia. Another name I see thrown around is Phaedra's, but as I mentioned, it doesn't seem like a likely option. We'll see her in a lot of other places like Married to Medicine, Ultimate Girls Trip, and recently announced The Traitors, which I think are better suited for her. Someone else I want to throw out is season 13's friend of LaToya. She reminded me a lot of early days Kenya when she was on, seeming kind of game to just come on and stir things up. I thought she was really fun to watch. Plus, she was relevant this year with the whole question of whether Drew and LaToya kissed on Bolo Night becoming one of the biggest sources of drama this season. If they really want to invest in Drew, I think bringing on LaToya could be the ticket. And although I haven't heard her name thrown around too much, a last option could be Eva Marcel. There's still a part of me that's buzzing from her time on America's Next Top Model when she was an absolute firecracker firecracker, and I like to tell myself she was only lame on her first go-round because she was either pregnant or on her best behavior as her partner was running for office. But I also kind of believe that she's just chilled out and isn't as confrontational as she was when she was 19 or whatever. She could be a good addition if the show needed a more calming presence, but it really needs the opposite. So while I would like to see Eva back, I don't think she'd revive the show. But I'm curious to hear who of these women, if anyone, you'd want to bring back. Or if there's another name I didn't mention. Is it time for Kim Fields to make her triumphant return? Or do we need to give Claudia Jordan another chance? Let me know. So let's move on to another tactic, which is a soft reboot of sorts. Think Roni season 5 or Miami season 4 style, where they keep a few ladies and bring in about the same number of new faces. Let's talk about who from the current cast should come back, and then we'll explore some possible new names. First, Kandi. Now, I love Kandi as a person. She's just an exceptional woman who really has it all. But do I enjoy watching her? Sometimes. I think she can be really funny, and when she's heated, she can bring a lot of emotion to a story. She also really triggers others as she's so accomplished, and I think quite simply they get jealous. So you can trust that until the end of time, people will come for Kandi. We saw it in established relationships like with Marlo throughout the season, and with Sheree somewhat during the season, and especially at the reunion when they got incredibly vicious with each other. We've also seen new people try it, as demonstrated this season by friend of Courtney, who arrived at the season premiere event with an agenda to rile Kandi up. But Kandi just doesn't seem to have the time or the heart for the show anymore. It's become a point of contention that she wasn't going to things, not showing up to the mini domestic trip to Birmingham and leaving early from the international trip to Portugal. I think the women are resentful that she kind of has her guard up and doesn't seem as invested in the show as they are. They feel like she uses the show to promote her businesses but doesn't want to stick around for the friendships. I think there's definitely some truth to that, but I also see that Kandi has really been burned by getting close to people on the show, both with Kim and with Phaedra, and if I were her, I'd be pretty guarded as well. But the show is a good way for her to stay in the spotlight and allows her to see a lot of success in the things she seems to feel more passionate about, so I get why she stays. I'm kind of torn on whether Kandi should stay or go. The pros of her staying are she provides incredible lifestyle content. She gives us the Lux Factor we watch the show for and does cool stuff given her career and has a cute family. She's also been a stable force on the show for 14 seasons, so it might feel odd with her gone. The cons of her staying are we can probably expect more of the same in terms of her storyline, and her salary probably takes a good portion of the budget, which if she was gone could instead go towards securing other big name peaches. Next, Marlo. I'm kind of torn. When Marlo's good, she's fantastic. She's funny, gives us great fashion moments, and has deep connections with the other ladies. She's really funny in her confessionals and is more than happy to give us little bits. I also find myself rooting for Marlo as she's led us into her complex emotional world as she reckons with the dissonance between her past and her present. I also just love the girly glamour she brings. I love seeing her townhouse and what she's gonna wear, but when Marlo's bad, it can get uncomfortable. I know it's a result of her trauma, so I have compassion and understanding for why she is the way she is, but seeing things like her rant against Drew are just not that fun to watch. Marlo can go low when she's in a reactive state. The situation with Kandi and her nephew's shooting seemed unfair. I get that Marlo felt grief, which can make you act irrationally, but I think Kandi was fair to be totally put off by Marlo trying to lay some sense of blame or at least shame on Kandi about the situation. I don't know. Marlo is a complex person, and my feelings towards her staying on the show mirror that. Next, let's talk about Marlo's seeming bestie, Sanya. She's a cast member I'm least into. When she was announced before season 14, I was stoked. We've seen a lot of women with an established name come onto these shows, but we'd never had an Olympian, so I thought that would be cool, but I'm just like not into sports at all, so I don't even know why I was excited. Her treatment toward her family made me not like her that much, and she just kind of annoyed me. I'm still not exactly clear on what Mommy Nation is, and I don't really care to find out. She doesn't naturally click with the other ladies besides Marlo, and that feels much more like an alliance than a true friendship. Sorry, I feel like this is really mean. I know it's an edited show, and I'm sure Sanya has a lot of really great qualities, and I'd like her if I met her in real life, but as a housewife, she just doesn't do it for me. I'd be fine with her leaving. But let's move on to a housewife who does do it for me, and that is Miss Twirl, the legendary Miss Kenya Moore. She's one of the housewives I'm most invested in, but production does not seem to share this sentiment. As mentioned earlier, she was blatantly edited out, which tells me that there must be some sort of trouble going on behind the scenes. Courtney said that she treated production badly, but in the words of Brooks Ayers, consider your source. I don't know. I mean, I never really care about building a business storylines, but if other housewives get to use the show as marketing, Kenya should get to as well. Plus, while not a full-on she by Sheree, Kenya Moore hair care is a long-running thing, so I think the audience would like to see a continuation. I know some of that was squashed with Kenya getting sick in Birmingham, so she didn't get to do her performance, which I think would have made the air, right? But I don't know. Something's definitely up. I want Kenya to stay selfishly, but it's seeming like our time could be coming to a close. Next, Monyetta, who spent her second year as a friend. I like her, I guess. The other women, specifically Kandi and Kenya, seem to really adore her, but I don't know that she has that pop factor that makes great TV. I'm totally neutral on Monyetta, but I'm not neutral on the other friend slash cousin of Courtney. I just don't like her. The whole cousin of Ralph thing was just very odd. Like, why are they so diehard loyal to each other when they just discovered that they're kind of distantly related? I don't know. I guess if we really want to dive into this whole thing, there's an in for her next season, but it's not my wish. She was just bad vibes, and her brand of drama is really not for me. I'll pass. But let's bring in her not cousin, Drew. Drew has historically been someone I enjoy watching. You can get the rundown on her first 2 seasons in my Best Sophomores video, which I'll link in the description. But in her first 2 seasons, she had this fun, messy, chaotic, wacky factor, and this season she was just a little bit more serious than I would like. She had big storylines, as in addition to the entertainment industry and divorce stuff, she was also dealing with her sexuality being questioned. I'm ready for Housewives in general to stop all this speculation. Drew's sexuality is her own business, and it's up to her if she wants to open up about it if there's anything to open up about. But I felt like Drew just wasn't as much fun this year. Maybe it's because she had so much going on, but I just didn't really enjoy her as much as I have in the past. But with the divorce, she definitely has something to talk about were she to come back. Her story is left with an ellipses, so we shall see. ... And last, Sheree, who I love. I think she's funny and ridiculous. She kind of follows the Kandi path in terms of storylines, with it either being focused on some sort of long-term venture, like She by Sheree or Chateau Sheree, both stories which have seemingly been wrapped up, or she focuses on her messy dating life. She went with the latter this time, bringing in her new beau, Martell, whose show I don't watch, so I felt kind of like I was missing some context. If you watch the Martell show and want to give me the rundown on him, please do so. But yeah, this kind of started off with a bang and then fizzled out, and by the end we weren't hearing that much about him. I thought Sheree was just fine this season. She has the OG status, so she brings that to the show, but it's not like the show is unwatchable when she's not part of the cast. I love watching Sheree, so I'm down for her to stay, but if she leaves, I can go back and rewatch her old seasons if I want to get my fix. I don't really feel strongly about her staying or going. Of the current ladies, I don't really know who should stay or go. If they're trying to keep the show feeling relatively the same, they need to keep some combination of Kandi, Kenya, and Sheree. Maybe they could get rid of one, but if we lost most of them, I think the feeling would be very different. If they wanted to go more new school, but keep some sense of what currently exists, they could go for a Drew, Sanya, Courtney lineup, but do we want that? I think people would riot. So in terms of who would stay in a halfsies reboot, I think it would depend on who was brought in. Now, I think most of the options would be women we don't yet know, but I thought of some potential names. First, Tamar Braxton. I know her from Celebrity Big Brother 2, which she actually won, beating out Kandi, who she has some major tension with. The two came in with pre-existing beef, kind of burying things to some degree on the show, but have since taken swipes at each other in the press. I think Tamar could be a good option because she's no stranger to reality TV, has history with Kandi, and is absolutely hysterical. She really has that it factor and is a lot of fun to watch. But I know she has had some personal struggles, so perhaps joining Housewives wouldn't be the healthiest decision. Another thought was to dip into Escape, perhaps. Let me know in the comments if there could be any good options there, as I haven't watched their show, and if I did in preparation for this video, it would be delayed like another 2 months, so I figured I'd ask y'all instead. A third option, which I'll admit is a total shot in the dark, I really know nothing about her, but trying to come up with some names, I got thinking of beloved Atlanta figures, thought of 2 Chainz, and Googled if he has a wife, and it turns out he does. I go to her Instagram, I like her vibe, I click on a picture, and who's leaving fire emojis? Miss Marlo Hampton. So she could potentially already have connections to the cast. Plus, according to her Insta bio, she's got a children's clothing line, a daycare, and a foundation, so she's definitely a motivated person, and the show could give her a way to showcase some of these ventures. So there could be an incentive for her to do the show. So I don't know, if I were casting the show, I'd reach out. It could be a good fit. And the idea of 2 Chainz popping up here and there sounds like fun. Another Atlanta figure we could pull from is Gucci Mane, as his wife's name has been thrown around before, and she also appears to be a good fit. She already has a makeup and fitness line, so I feel like there's an incentive for her to do the show. I don't really know much about her, but if you do, give me the rundown on if you think she'd work. But I do think if they try to do a soft reboot and keep some of the more established veterans, they'll have to get some big names like the ones I mentioned. If not, I fear that the chemistry just won't be there and it'll stay underwhelming. They've got to add people that are going to challenge the status quo of the group and make a play to take on that centerpiece position. They need to find genuinely exciting newbies. We've seen a lot of women join the cast of Atlanta, but nobody has totally taken over the show since Kenya and Porsha in season 5. When Kenya and Porsha joined, it was as Sheree and Kim were leaving, so their success could partly be because 2 of the historically more entertaining figures on the show were suddenly gone, freeing up screen time to devote to them. Nene was also in LA for most of the season, so she wasn't taking as much focus as she typically did, so their success could partly be because there was a sudden personality vacuum to fill on the show. But they also had the dynamism to back it up, as both were incredibly entertaining people ready to make their mark on the show. It's truly wild that the show hasn't had a great rookie in 10 seasons. I'm not really sure if it's because the newbies since Kenya and Porsha haven't had the it factor, or if it's the fact that the established veterans have had such an it factor that it didn't allow for newbies to dominate and shine brighter. I think Claudia from season 7 and Latoya from season 13 had some of that sparkle, but the show didn't really invest in them, so neither reached their full potential. There's definitely a criticism that production doesn't allow newbies to stick around for long enough for the audience to grow an attachment, but it also seems like they're not thoroughly checking for chemistry with the existing cast. Penny went on former Atlanta producer Carlos King's podcast and talked about how when she joined, she filmed for a long time before officially getting word that she had the peach. There are reports that something similar happened with Phaedra and Cynthia when they joined in season 3, even going so far as to say that the two were competing for their peach, so we know that in the past perhaps more care was put into testing the women before really committing to them. On that podcast, Kenya said that in recent years the women haven't had to go through this earn it process, so maybe that's something to bring back. I just think it's a tricky situation to cast around when you have some of the cast as these icons that newbies have most likely been watching for years. Like, how are they going to have equal status? I'm sure there are dynamic women in Atlanta just waiting to be found, but if they don't want to go through a long, arduous search, casting from a pool who may already have some sort of cachet might be an easier way to create a cast that works. It just might be expensive. And our last tactic is going full rhoa season 14 and completely rebooting the franchise with all new women. This is definitely the most dramatic strategy, but I'm not opposed. I really enjoyed the rhoa reboot, so I'm open-minded to the idea of it working in Atlanta. Now, New York obviously is a bigger city than Atlanta, so you've got more options of people to cast from, but Atlanta has a lot of amazing women that could potentially be great. I also think that with a blank slate, it gives new women more of a chance to shine, and it gives way for fresh, brand new social dynamics. If I were casting the show, I'd look out for a few things. Atlanta has such a strong legacy, and I think if I wanted to keep the show feeling like itself, I'd pull from some of the qualities that have been proven successful. First, I'd want a strong, hot girl leader. They don't have to be evil, but I want a Heather Chandler or Regina George type. Someone who knows their hot shit and loves running things for the group. A character like this will bring the group together, especially if she comes on with a minion or two. Love this archetype in the media I consume, and I think it's important for the group to feel like a group, and someone strong-willed with leadership qualities is crucial for this to happen. Another quality I'd look for is someone who really has the gift of gab to bring us great confessionals. We need echoes of Nene, Phaedra, Kenya, Porsha, Sheree. I could go on. I want someone who can really narrate a scene in a funny way to bring that comedic factor Atlanta is known for. A strong confessional can really elevate a scene, so I think it's pretty important to look for. I'd also look for entertainment industry connections. I don't want a cast full of actresses, but I think it's cool getting to see the behind the scenes of the industry, and it works best on Beverly Hills in Atlanta. Keeping this factor will keep the show feeling like itself and bring us glamorous personal stories. Next, I'd look for girls who were raised Southern. I want to see passive-aggressive words exchanged in disorienting ways. Remember that exchange Nene and Phaedra had at the season 3 reunion on whether they knew each other? Yeah, I want that. It's something that's so specifically Southern and honestly just gives me life. Dipping into the pageant world could potentially bring us some of this as well. And sorry, but I want a fashion girly. I love the looks Housewives bring, so let's keep this going. If this were to happen, a total reboot, there of course would be backlash. It was super intense after the rhoa reboot was announced, even with the promise of a legacy show. That seems to have been axed in favor of doing girls trip spin-offs with the veterans on rhoa, and I'd be down to see something similar with Atlanta. Doing just a trip versus a full season is obviously way less of a commitment, so I think we could see some bigger names sign on. So yeah, I don't know what exactly would be the best solution for Atlanta, but there's definitely a lot of possibilities. But now I want to hear other people's thoughts, so let me know what you think should be done. If you like the video, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with anyone you think might be interested. If you want to connect on social media, my ats are deeplysewerfish on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. But I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye!